Billy Austin, and welcome to Rock Book Show. And today I am honored to have with me Mr. Duff McKagan. Welcome, Duff.
Thanks for having me.
Is it a natural progression for you at all to go from songwriter to columnist to author?
You know, I think there's a lot of people I know that are a lot smarter than me that maybe can't write well, and I think it's just sort of I grew up listening to music, and then when I started playing music, I kind of took my influences, the bands I listened to, and turned it into whatever I was doing. So I was kind of used to taking inputs and making something new and fresh out of it. And I started reading a lot in the 90s, in the mid-90s, after I got sober. And, flash forward to 2007, and Velvet Revolver's on tour, and I get a call from this random guy saying, hey, Men's Italian Vogue wants an article on 1987 Hollywood, and I told him that you'd gone through college and that maybe you'd be the guy to write about it. Well, they wanted a fashion piece, 2,500 word fashion piece. Well, I'm not, I don't really pay attention to fashion, so I wrote this I started writing this thing. I'll try it. I was on the road with Velvet Revolver. I remember I started writing this thing in the back of a van, and I wrote about my experience in 1987. It was drugs, and it was sex, and it was this kind of reckless, abandoned time in my life, and they loved the article, and they printed it, and from that, the Seattle Weekly asked this column there had come free. Whoever was writing it, Thursday column had left, and they asked if I'd try it, and I tried the first week and the second week and third week, and pretty soon 6 weeks had gone by, and I started to find this voice that I kind of liked, and I started to see the humor in my own life by writing about things, how I saw things, and Playboy called, and they wanted me to write a weekly financial column. So suddenly I had two deadlines. So I was still playing music, of course, but it was like this other thing that I was developing. And then I started writing these other more private stories, and that kind of goes into like why I wrote this book. I don't know if there's a why necessarily. It's just that I am a practicing writer. And I started to write. Common questions I get all the time are, how did you get to the point that your pancreas burst? And how did you get out of that? So for me to tell somebody how much I drank or how much drugs I did, they would just have nothing to equate it to. So I started writing about, really what I went into was insanity. From a 14-year-old kid from Seattle playing in punk rock bands to a 29-year-old man scared of everything and really quite insane, and then finally into the hospital and my way out, and which was a great thing to write about, the way out. Writing about going insane was it was hard at times. I made myself very uncomfortable when I wrote. Physically, I would put myself in uncomfortable positions, so my back would hurt, and I was reading Cormac McCarthy, really kind of sparse, dark, beautiful things, but there was a point during writing these parts of the book. I'd write them in like 2,000 word stints, and then I'd write 2,000 words a day on that, and then I'd have to write my column, and then I'd write another 2,000 words on something else in the book, and then I'd have to write another column, and then I'd write 4,000 words, or I'd write 800 words, or whatever, and I'd have to balance that. I would have to write about the good stuff. I didn't write this book in any order. And then the editing process was taking all these stories and how do I make somebody uncomfortable? How do I really get them into my headspace? And we tried the experiment of the story going back and forth a bunch in the first 120, 30 pages. So you get a sense of movement and a little bit of confusion, but I don't think the book is confusing at all, but you're like, whoa, okay, and I end up, and then the book sort of takes off at page 120 or so.
It's an incredible journey, and I'm glad that you mentioned letting us into your own headspace, because that is what the reader feels. That's what I felt when I was reading it, and I also got this underlying sense of reflection and introspection from you along the way as well. And when you talk about your own voice, this book is also not co-written by anything. How important was that to you?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I had no great need to, number one, like just do a book deal for the money, or get a ghostwriter and just talk to somebody about my life. That wasn't interesting to me. What was interesting was really trying to discover some of the things that got me into trouble, and really reflect again on how I got out of it. And it was very healthy for me. I think I really chose not to tell, like, it's not a tell-all book by any means. It's a tell-all on me. I wrap myself out, and I take responsibility for my own life. I found I started writing this thing, and you look in that rearview mirror that we all do. I think we must all do it, or at least I did.
I do it.
And it's like, it's always some other dude's fault. It's always whatever that thing that happened back whenever it happened. It's always somebody else's fault. And I really started to find out, oh yeah, maybe I had something to do with that. And even the whole guns sort of unraveling or whatever. I could have. It's not everybody else's fault. I was a part of that band, an equal part of that band. I could have done a lot of things. I don't live with regret or resentment or any of those things. But I started to see, like, if I was the guy I am now, then perhaps I would have dealt with things a lot differently.
Yeah, and let's face it, a lot of those stories have been told differently by other people as well. And I like in the front of the book as well that you say, these are my stories as I recall them. And, that's my truth. And I think that's a great way to put it. I want to ask you about the title. It's a song of yours, of course. But why did you choose it, and when did you choose it?
Right, the title of the book. Did not start, I didn't have a title. My working title of this book was All the Shit I Don't Remember.
Also a good title.
Right. But I don't know. Then I got done with the book, and Tim Moore, who was my editor at Playboy for the year that I wrote there, I was sending him my passages before we had the book deal and all that stuff. And I was sending him, and he would send stuff back, and he would send me just a text on, fourth paragraph of document number 8. What did that look like? Or what did that smell like? And I don't know. Well, write about it. I was used to him editing me at Playboy, so I'd go through that thing, like, I'd call him, like, don't make me write anymore. I mean, that was good. It was good, but tell me what it looked like. I want to know, and things like that. And so this book started to develop, and I guess at some point, once we, Stacy from Simon & Schuster got involved, she's like, you got to have a title for the book. And all the shit I don't remember suddenly was irrelevant, because I did start to recall a lot of things as I wrote this book. So somebody said, oh, you call it It's So Easy. And I don't know, because it wasn't. And I thought of the In Other Lives. And I don't know. It just seemed to fit. Once I came up with that title, I was like, okay, done. That part's done. And I'm actually pretty proud of the title. Yeah.
And it's a wonderful book as well. And it does...
A cool name like Slash. You can just name your book Slash. You've been
in a lot of bands. Has there ever been an official count of how many bands you have been in? Because you started when you were like 13, 14?
Yeah. Well, like when I moved to Hollywood, I had played with, now some of these bands only lasted a week, 31 bands by the time I was 20.
That's a lot of bands. And one of the bands you were in was The Veins. And you have some great pictures in the book. But I thought, God, this is really brave of Duff to put this picture of him in here in The Veins. And and then I thought, if I had great legs like that, I would put that picture in the book as well. And then you started talking about Prince, and I thought, now this outfit is starting to make sense.
1981 or so. Yeah. I put that picture in. Lance Mercer, who became the Pearl Jam photographer for so many years. It's a small community in Seattle. We're all like cross-pollinated there. And Lance had these pictures of the veins. And he goes, dude, you got to put this in the book. And he showed me the picture. I said, Lance, I can't put that picture in the book. You got to do it, dude. That was you. That was you. And he gave me this impassioned sort of, not that he was going to make a bunch of money by getting a picture in my book. That wasn't the point. He didn't even charge me. It's just, he said, you got to, man. I saw you grow up. I saw your whole thing. You have to have that picture in there. So he convinced me.
What is it about being in a band that you love so much?
Well, I'm a musician first, and I'm not a solo musician. Even Loaded, which a band I front, it's still a band. And I don't know. I think I really liked team sports, and I liked music, and a band was just a perfect. And I grew up in a big family, so I like the fact that you're doing something together. I think you're much better. There are great guys like Prince who can just do it all themselves, and they're great at it. But for me, the challenge has always been like, how do you get this group of people to when the chemistry's right? There's nothing like it, and it's how I make my living nowadays. But it's still that same thing. Like, it's got to be right from the beginning. And Velvet Revolver was that same thing. Slash and I reconnecting, and Matt, and getting Dave Kushner in the band, who was a guy who had played in Loaded, and Slash knew from junior high. So it was like this perfect little fit. And getting Scott in the band finally was like the chemistry was pretty vicious.
Pretty cool. And you got to work with a lot of your musical heroes along the way. I'm a sucker for a good mom story. I love the story about your mom and Jeff Beck. I thought that was a great story. Yeah. But Johnny Thunders, and you've recorded his song, You Can't Wrap Your Arms Around a Memory, and you use that as the title of the last section of the book. What does that song mean to you?
Oh, it means so many things.
I wondered about that, and I wondered if it's changed over the years, too.
It certainly has. I mean, I remember when I first heard that song, it was kind of like that anthem of being fucked up, and then it became that anthem of like, well, I'm gonna die, live fast, die young, and then it became this. And I recorded that song right before I got really sick. So I thought, well, this will be the song I go out with. It brought me in. I'll take it out, and then it became this kind of survival story song for me. And Johnny was one of the first guys that was always elegantly fucked up. At least I thought as a teenager. Yeah, man, that's what I want to be. And then I saw him when Guns. I was blown away. We opened for Johnny Thunders in L.A. early in our career, and I thought, I was so excited. And then I saw him backstage, and jonesing, and it wasn't glamorous, and it was sad, and so I think it represents growth for me, maturing.
And speaking of maturity, you're a dad now, and there's a lot of love in your book for your girls and your wife and your dog, and now dogs. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you, when you know you're going to be putting this story out there, and you know you're going to be so honest about some of the darker things in your life, do you look at it through a different filter now that you're a dad and you know your girls might see this?
They're definitely going to see it. Grace, my older, who's 14, she, I opened the story actually at her birthday party. So I opened the book now. It's now. And I'm a dad. I'm this kind of goofy dad, and it's me discovering kind of through her friends and seeing my kids at the ages I was doing a bunch of knuckleheaded stuff. I'm like, wow, I was a kid. I was a little kid when I was doing that stuff, and that's what really got me into a reflective mode. At least it sets the tone for the book. And I've been honest with my kids. Everything YouTube is a pinky click away for them. So they've seen videos of me and me telling jokes, drunk off my ass or falling down or whatever. Dad, why did you do that? Hey, Dad, why don't you ever drink wine when everybody else is drinking wine? Hey, Dad, why don't you? Hey, Dad, why? And so I've had to tell them gently, slowly, and now they're old enough. My younger won't. She's not interested in the book. She won't read it until, I would imagine, until she's probably 16 or 17. But she knows the stories, not maybe in graphic detail. I doubt Grace, my older one, will read the book in full. She just wants to see where she's at in the book. And, she had a great comment. She read the first chapter because it's about her birthday party. And her biggest comment wasn't about the stuff I was doing. It was like, oh, that boy and girl who were kissing, they broke up.
And that's a big deal when you're that age.
Yeah, that was her big deal right there. Okay.
Good. Well, before we go, I just really briefly, I loved the story at the end of the book about when you got to see the Clash on their first tour and how that resonated with you, and if you could share that story.
Well, yeah. So I got to see a lot of really great shows as a kid, and I thought they were great shows. And I saw Zeppelin in '77. I was 13, and punk rock hit about the same year. And being the last of 8 kids, you just want something of your own for once. And punk rock was my chance to have something of my own. We all played instruments, and punk rock I found I had an affinity for, and it was my own thing. And the Clash came to Seattle in 1979, and I got a ticket, and there was like 200 people there, and they just absolutely blew my mind. They were so real, and it was so up close. It was, it's Clash, very exotic from England, this band, and I could touch if I wanted to, and I realized, okay, they're okay with that too. They're not separate from us. And Joe Strummer said, he said that on the mic. He goes, "There's no difference. There's a barrier here," and there was some security guy punched one of these 200 punk rock kids in the nose and broke his nose. And Paul Simonon, the bass player, came up with an axe from the side of the stage, like a fire axe, and chopped down the wooden barrier. And Strummer said, "There's no difference. There should be no barrier. We are you, and you are us. We're beautiful." And it resonates to this day. Yeah.
And I think it resonates through the words of your book as well. Congratulations on your Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nomination. Congratulations on the book. Duff McKagan, thank you so much for being here all the way from Seattle, Washington. Duff McKagan, thank you.
We got planes now.